Aí, pessoal, basicamente o que a gente vai ter aqui agora, a gente tem duas salas rolando. Uma vai ser o pessoal que vai assistir via YouTube, live stream, e aqui uma sala, né, do Google Meet fechada, que primeiro o Gary vai se apresentar, vai fazer uma apresentação aberta, nós vamos ficar os primeiros 45 minutos de apresentação dele, e depois a gente encerra o stream, e aí tem um bate-papo, né, entre a gente aqui, né, pro um momento mais íntimo de conversa com o Gary. A apresentação vai ser em inglês, especialmente esses 40, e aí quando vocês forem perguntar, né, fiquem, aí vocês podem perguntar em inglês, português, que vocês gostarem, e eu traduzo. Vai ser dessa forma, estamos muito animados para o papo hoje. Excellent, Gary. Thank you. So the way we will work is we have this Google Meet here and a live stream on YouTube. And so for first 45 minutes, as we talked, I'll do a brief introduction of you and introduce also Obrigado. Olá a todos, muito bem-vindos à Masterclass de hoje com o nosso palestrante e professor visitante Gary Bolles. Nós somos muito animados por ter vocês junto aqui com a gente hoje. E eu queria basicamente apresentar um pouco, né, sobre o evento que a gente vai ter hoje, que é a Masterclass com o Gary, contar um pouco, né, me apresentar e da Sirius. E apresentar também a Sirius, que é a organização que está organizando esse evento hoje. Primeiramente, muito prazer, eu sou Arnobio Morelix, eu sou um dos fundadores da Sirius e estou ligando hoje aqui do Sirius Lab no Vale do Silício, que é nosso instituto de pesquisa sobre o futuro do trabalho. Para quem ainda não conhece a Sirius, nós somos uma escola de tecnologia para o futuro hoje, em que a gente ajuda empresas a crescer e acelerar os seus talentos de tecnologia com duas formas. A primeira é reskilling, que é levando talento de alto potencial de zero a emprego em 6 meses, em lugares como Google e Ambev. E a segunda forma é upskilling, que é um método que nós criamos para levar o seu talento de júnior a pleno 2 vezes mais rápido, como uma residência médica para talento em tecnologia. E aí a melhor parte todo mundo ganha. Do lado da empresa, elas só pagam por resultados de contratação e promoção e ganham uma garantia de retenção do colaborador. E do lado dos estudantes, eles recebem bolsa, um trabalho e certificação. E a gente está fazendo isso porque a gente acredita que toda revolução industrial precisa de uma revolução educacional e que ainda não aconteceu. A gente acredita que a Sirius está criando isso hoje. E né, hoje, pela primeira vez, com muito orgulho, a gente anuncia publicamente o Sirius Lab, que é o nosso laboratório do futuro do trabalho aqui no Vale do Silício. A sede da Sirius é em Belo Horizonte, no Brasil. A gente tem alunos pelo Brasil inteiro. E os 4 pilares, né, do Sirius Lab são pesquisa, masterclasses, insights e publicações e o fórum executivo. E hoje é a nossa inauguração, né, tanto do Sirius Lab quanto dessa série de masterclasses. Eu estou muito orgulhoso da gente poder ter com a gente hoje o Gary Bolles, que é um dos papas do tema do futuro do trabalho. Ele é um grande amigo meu. Eu vou, a partir de agora, a palestra durante hoje será em inglês, então eu vou mudar para falar inglês em instantes, e todos vocês vão receber o link com as legendas em português depois, para quem quiser acompanhar. E hoje, né, durante o evento, nós vamos conversar e apresentar em inglês. Eu estou aqui, antes de eu passar a palavra para o Gary, eu quero contar um pouquinho para vocês da jornada dele. E Gary, and I've introduced a bit of what we're doing today, about you and Sirius Education. I'll share a little bit about your bio with them and about your book in Portuguese, and then I'll pass the word to you and let you take it from there. Sound good?
Wonderful. So, thank you, my friend.
Thank you. O Gary como eu falei, né, um dos papas do tema de futuro do trabalho. Ele recentemente escreveu esse livro, que é As Próximas Regras para Trabalho, né, e o Mundo do Trabalho. Eu recomendo altamente que vocês busquem esse livro. E, além de autor, ele também é chair para Futuro do Trabalho na Singularity University, que é aqui na Califórnia, e que é um campus localizado no campo de trabalho da NASA aqui. E ele dá palestras e escreve sobre esse assunto ao redor do mundo. Ele já tem mais de 1 milhão de estudantes nos cursos dele sobre carreira e futuro do trabalho. Ele também é um fundador da Charette, que é uma iniciativa para alto impacto que ajuda organizações, comunidades, educadores e governos com estratégias para as necessidades futuras de trabalhadores e estudantes. E também é cofundador do e-Parachute, que ajuda pessoas com transições de carreira e buscas de trabalho futuro. Com isso, né, nós estamos muito felizes e orgulhosos de ter o Gary aqui com a gente hoje. Gary, thank you so much for being with us today. We're excited to learn from you about future of work, and I'll let you take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. So I always enjoy our conversations and our collaborations, and I really appreciate this opportunity to be able to talk to the Sirius community. So I welcome from San Francisco, here in Silicon Valley. I've had the privilege of being able to talk to people from all around the world, especially many people from Brazil. I've only visited Sao Paulo once, but I'm looking forward to returning before long. And I wanted to offer some thoughts today about just what so many of us have gone through in this significant shift in the world around us, and especially what's happened to work and to learning, and some of the opportunities I think that Sirius is bringing in terms of helping people to be able to adapt to these seismic changes. So I'm going to show my screen a little bit, and then would love to just run through what I call sort of fire starter ideas. Like I'm going to show you a variety of different images and talk about some of the trends and changes that we've been through, and then make it a great conversation with Arnobio. So, all right. So, as Arnobio was saying, Singularity University, my company Charette, and e-Parachute, and then in addition, I also have 9 courses on LinkedIn Learning with over 1 million learners, with courses like Learning Agility and a Learning Mindset, and many of the ideas that I talk about are ideas that are just embodied in what Sirius is doing. And then many of the ideas, of course, that I'll be talking about are in my book, The Next Rules of Work, which is in the process of being translated into Portuguese. It's going to take a little while, but hopefully that'll also offer another resource for you. So, but the basic premise, I think one of the reasons that I wanted to just sort of give you a little bit of my sense of sort of the changes that are coming through. So I think there's 5 major things that we need to do as we're thinking about the way that the world around us has changed. I'm going to just jump to the ending and tell you what I think the answers are, and then I'm going to describe why I think these things are true. So the first is, I believe that this period, if we get a picture in our minds, it's that it's a reset. It's a big change in how we think about work, and we've never been through something like this in modern history, and that's both a challenge, but it's a great opportunity. Second is that exponential change. And I know this is something that Arnobio talks about quite a bit. It's the new, not just normal, but the new abnormal, and I'll describe why. Because of those changes, we're now creating these rules of work. We're all working in totally different ways. We're learning in different ways. And that's a process of co-creation. Fourth, to be able to do that, I talk a lot about what I call the 3 legs of the stool: mindset, skill set, and tool set. And I'll explain what each of those are. And then finally, because we're entering into this new phase of this great reset, we're emerging. We're emerging back into the world, and we have to choose. We each need to be very intentional about how we do that. So let me just run through each of these. You don't have to agree with anything I'm saying. As a matter of fact, when we have the Q&A and the discussion, I'd love to get challenges or different thoughts about these. But here's my framing. So I wave a magic wand, and we suddenly we go back in 2 years, and here I am. I'm calling this the Great Reset. What does that actually mean? Well, we'll go back 2 years ago to March 2020, exactly 2 years, and we all had a lot of the language, the rhetoric, the story we told ourselves about big changes in the rules of work were, what was it then? Robots and software, right? And then along comes a virus. And it's not just the virus, but it's the ripple effects of the virus. It's the decisions that we made that were having all of these impacts on our industries, our organizations, our work, and our lives. And so I looked back at previous resets, like the Great Recession, and I said, well, I think this is a great reset. And I think that it's going to go through 3 phases. I wrote an article in April of 2020, and I said, so it's very likely we're in this first phase where we're all falling off the cliff, total uncertainty. We have no idea where the bottom is. What's happening with this virus? We don't know. And then there's this middle phase that I call the uncomfortable middle, and that's kind of like a fever chart or a heartbeat. Oh, suddenly the virus, we have our arms around it. We can go back to work. Oh, no, here comes the Omicron variant. We can't go back to work. And so this is what the middle is very likely to be, this on again, off again thing. And then there would be this third phase where we could not just build back, but we could build back better. So we are right here. We're at this emergent part of the third phase. But this is the picture I want to urge you to have in your mind of what we've just gone through in the past 2 years. We dealt with complete uncertainty. Then we dealt with changing uncertainty. And now we have a chance to have things be a little more certain, but we have to design that. We have to do that intentionally. But this is not likely to be the only reset that we're going to experience. So that's my second point, which is these exponential changes, this is pretty likely the new normal. So, or the new abnormal. Now, you've probably heard about exponential change, certainly with my work with Singularity University, Ray Kurzweil, Peter Diamandis, our co-founders. You know, they've talked quite a bit about how change happens first very slowly. It doubles, but it's doubling off of a very small base, and then it goes faster and faster and faster, and then eventually it's a big hockey stick curve. We didn't all have these digital distraction devices a dozen years ago. And now more than half the people on the planet walk around with a cell phone. And so it isn't just cell phone technology, it's a whole bunch of different technologies that are also going through very, very rapid development, and they accelerate each other. It's just that we don't always see them at the beginning. Here I am in San Francisco, and this street right near me is a test bed for Waymo, the Google self-driving car company. And so I see self-driving cars. I can literally see them out the window from my house, but others around the world have never seen a self-driving car. And so this is what happens with exponential change. At first, it's invisible to us, and then suddenly it's everywhere. And we're going to see this over and over again with these exponential technologies. So as the science fiction author William Gibson is fond of saying, the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. That is, the changes in technology are happening all around us. It's just that we don't always see them. We don't always know what's happening. But you are here at the beginning of this inflection curve. And as my friend Shelley Palmer says, today is the slowest day of the rest of your life. We can only anticipate that that curve is going to change. Now, if I had told you even a month or two ago, sure, you've just been through this pandemic thing, and then there's going to be a war someplace in the world, and that's going to have all these ripple effects, just like the ripples in the pond, that's going to affect economies that aren't even on the same continent. You might have said, well, that's not likely to happen. I can't even imagine that that would happen. And so the whole idea, these are called, by the author Nassim Taleb, these are called black swan events. The whole idea that the exponential change is probably the new abnormal of our lives. We can't anticipate what the next black swan will be. We can only anticipate that there will be one. So that's my second point. Exponential change, new abnormal. Third point is, because of these changes, we are now co-creating rules for work and learning and the organization, and we're doing them together, and we're doing them in real time, and we're doing them around the globe. You've seen the headlines. You've seen talks about the Great Resignation. Here I am talking about the Great Reset. Obviously, you know about remote and distributed work and learning. Arnobio was just talking about upskilling and reskilling. You've seen these headlines. All of these changes are happening all at once. And so it can be very, very difficult for us to step back as humans with all this exponential change. Our minds kind of think linearly. We don't think in terms of hockey sticks. We can't really project how all these changes are coming together. So let me give you another picture. I showed you the picture of the three phases of the pandemic, of the Great Reset. Here's another picture, another image to use in your mind as you think about what we're doing as we're changing the world of work together. There were these old rules that we inherited from the industrial era. We still go to offices. We still have desks and cubicles. We still have horrible commutes. These are all things we inherited from a time where we were doing things more like factories. As a matter of fact, you know where the 5-day work week came from? There was a factory in the northeast of the US 100 years ago that had a number of workers who were Christians and a number of workers who were Jewish. And the people who led the organization said, well, we're going to give the Christians Sunday off, we'll give the Jewish people Saturday off, and we'll give everybody both Saturday and Sunday. And that's how the weekend began. That was only 100 years ago. And now that has infected the world, but it's old rules. The whole idea that there was a specific time that you rested and then you worked all the rest of the time. And then along came these new rules, Silicon Valley. People were experimenting with things like remote working and distributed working. And yet they weren't really widely distributed. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And then along comes a virus. And now we are co-creating the next rules. So once again, you are here. We are at that inflection point. We are at that emergent time where the Great Reset has gone through its final phase, and we don't know that there won't be another variant. But we have to create these next rules together because we have to figure out what is work in this era. Well, how have some of those rules changed? Well, I'm not going to go through all of these. I'll show you just a couple, but the basic premise is that there were these old rules and now we're leapfrogging. We're jumping to the next rules. The old world, they were analog first. We were in person together. Now it's digital first. We're doing Zoom calls like this or Google Meet calls like this. Work in organizations was a hierarchy. It was an org chart. But increasingly, it's more not a workforce or a network. It's what I call a Worknet. It's a bunch of people all collaborating together to create value for the organization stakeholders. We used to have very rigid work roles, rigid job descriptions, but increasingly work is now becoming more problem centric. We focus on solving problems. That's what we do well as humans. And more project centric. It's not so much traditional jobs as solving a series or a portfolio of projects. The old the old rules of management, I called management by surveillance. Remember how few companies actually had had remote work policies. They only had to be in person to be trusted. And then along comes a virus and suddenly we have to trust everybody. So management by surveillance gives way towards what I call the manager becoming a team guide. No longer the one with all the answers, but the one with the best questions. No longer the sage on the stage, as my friend Esther Wojcicki calls it, but the guide on the side, the team guide. Our careers, think of the process that we went through with careers. It used to be sort of in 3 phases. I'll talk about those in just a second. But now careers are much more of what I call a portfolio of work. And then finally, a job, all the aspects of a job that used to be where you went. You went to an office or a workplace. And increasingly, more and more work is what you do, not just where you do it. So I'm going to take just these last 2, careers and jobs. Let's talk about what a career was. Well, my father was an author of books. He wrote one called What Color is Your Parachute? And then he wrote a book called The 3 Boxes of Life. And his idea was there's a big chunk of learning at the beginning of our lives. Then there's a big chunk of work. And then there's a big chunk of leisure in what I call the period formerly known as retirement. Well, increasingly now, a young person still goes to some early learning experience early on, but then they keep learning online and then they get a day job and then they take a gap month with their friends and then they get another day job, but then they're driving for Uber at night and they're working on a startup with their friends. And it's a constantly changing landscape of learning and work and leisure. And this is what parents ask me all the time, why won't my kid get a real job? This is what young people are doing to factor for a world of exponential change. They know that that exponential curve is happening. They know that these massive shifts can happen overnight. And so just like an investment counselor would tell you to have a safe investment and then maybe take a little more risk, that's driving for Uber, and then maybe a lot of risk, but in a small part of your portfolio, working on a startup with your friends, it's a hedge strategy. It's a hedge against the world of exponential change. But if you're going to do this for work, you also have to do it for learning. In the past, and one of the reasons that we need something like Sirius Education is in the past, we put all of our investment in that upfront learning, whether it was high school, vocational school, college, and then we were done. But in a world of exponential change, we can't be done. We need a portfolio of learning just like we had a portfolio of work. And so this is increasingly what we need to do to be able to deal with a world of exponential change. Now, if that's what careers are becoming, is this portfolio of work and learning, what's a job? Well, I'll go through this very quickly, but basically think of it as having 6 different aspects: where we do our work, whom we work with, what our work is, the problems that we solve and the skills that we use, when we do our work, when we do our best work, how we do our work, the values, and so on, the process we go through doing our work, and then finally the why, what drives us, what gives us meaning in our work. Well, we know in the age of the Great Reset, the first thing that we did is we did remote and distributed work. The where changed very, very rapidly. But then so did all of the others. Who we worked with became much more of a network of people. Now we can collaborate with anybody around the globe. We could have done that before, but now we know that's the new deliverable. That's the new normal. We know that we have this portfolio of work, as I said. We know that work must become much more flexible. A study was just released in the United States by McKinsey that said of all the things that an employer can do to try to keep somebody in their job is to offer them the opportunity to be flexible. Let them choose their own schedule. Let them choose whom they work with. Let them choose more of the projects that they work on. We know that the how, that what I call the tool set of work, and I'll talk much more about this, is constantly changing. Now it's a set of techniques and technologies that allow us to be far more digital and nimble. And then finally, so much of what we do in work One of the reasons for those headlines about the great resignation is that many people are looking for more meaning in their work. And so this is how jobs are changing so dramatically in that great reset. We could just sort of live with it. We could just sort of react to it. But instead, what we can do is we can actually be proactive about designing work so that it's more human centric. And so that the where, the who, the what, the when, the how, and the why of work, each of us has more control over, and we can co-create. So that's really how jobs are changing. How do we prepare for all of this? Like, if this is how much work is changing, and what are the ways, what are the processes we can use to be able to get our arms around this and to be able to deal with this world of exponential change? Well, I would argue there's really three things, three legs of the stool, and I call those mindset, skill set, and tool set. If you were looking at a big lake or an ocean you wanted to cross on a boat, and I'd waved the magic wand and given you all the skill set, you're a sailor, you've sailed many times before, but you look at the lake or the ocean and you say, it's too big, it's too crazy, I'm not going to go. All the skill set, but none of the mindset. I wave a magic wand again, and now you have all the mindset of crossing the lake or the ocean, and none of the skill set, but you think, how hard could that be? You get in the boat, you start to row, and you hit storms, you hit problems, you solve those problems, and you get to the other side, and you say, how hard could that be? So skill set is critical, but mindset eats skill set for lunch. And then finally, if you are in a boat and you don't know where you are, the storm is overhead, I don't care how good your mindset or skill set is, you need a good GPS. You need to be able to have the tool set that allows you to get there. So, waving my magic wand, if I could give everybody on the planet the most effective mindset, skill set, and tool set, what would those be? Mindset, I want you to have four things. I want you to help others, first off, to be effective in their work. I want you to want to be effective in your work. Some people talk about performance. I say, no, we want to be effective. We want to be delivering, creating the value that we believe we're going to do for customers, we're going to do it for our coworkers, we're going to do it for whomever the stakeholders of the organization are. Next, we want to be able to enable growth. We want to grow ourselves. If we don't think of ourselves as lifelong learners, if we don't think of ourselves as continually growing and changing, we're going to find ourselves at a tremendous disadvantage in that world of exponential change. Third is, we've all gotten the memo now. We need to build very inclusive teams. We need psychological diversity and psychological safety to be able to help people to be able to solve problems as a team sport. And that means we must involve people with very diverse ways of thinking and very diverse backgrounds. And then finally, we need to be aligned. If more and more of work is going to be distributed and remote, if more and more work is going to be flexible, and not everybody we work with is going to be in the office or the workplace today, but they might be there tomorrow, we have to stay in alignment with each other. So these are the four aspects of mindset: being effective, enabling growth, ensuring involvement, and encouraging alignment. And if you're going to start in any one place, I'm going to suggest starting with growth. As a matter of fact, Carol Dweck, the author, has a book called Mindset, and she talks about needing a growth mindset to be able to continually solve the problems of today and tomorrow. So if that's mindset, what about skill set? What should we be doing about skill set? Again, I've got a magic wand. How would I help you to have the skills you would most need? Well, Arnobio was talking about the whole process of upskilling and reskilling. I'm fine with training. That sort of works fine with me. But no matter what your label is, each of us needs to continually learn new skills. In the past, we've focused on more of what I call no skills, knowledges, bodies of information. But the shelf life of information is decaying. So we still need to learn those. But you'll find in what I think the ethos of Sirius is we need to focus more on what I call flex skills. That is, skills that are usable in a range of different situations. If you were good when you were 5 years old at convincing your parents to let you stay up past your bedtime, you're probably going to be good at persuading. And so that means you could do sales, you could do business development, you could be a politician. Well, maybe not a politician, but certainly you developing this skill set, it could be usable in a range of situations. Now, what am I going to wish you had for those top 4 skills? I want you to become a problem solver who's adaptive, creative, and with empathy. A problem solver because, as I was saying, that's what we do as humans. That's why people pay us. That's why we pay other people. We want to be adaptive because that world of exponential change is not going to slow down. Remember, slowest day of the rest of your life. We need to be creative because this is what keeps us ahead of robots and software. And finally, we need to have empathy, another uniquely human skill. As a matter of fact, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, he says, I would say the source of all innovation is what is the most humane quality each of us has, which is empathy. Empathy is a superpower, whether it's empathizing with the needs of a customer, empathizing with the needs of a coworker, empathizing with the needs of the planet. So if you put all these together, I call this PACE. In English, it's an acronym: problem solvers, adaptive, creative, with empathy. And these are the skills that if I had my magic wand, each one of us would have. And they're all trainable. And then finally, I've talked about mindset, I've talked about skill set. Now I want to talk about toolset. Here in Silicon Valley, we tend to lead with toolset. We think if you have just the right technology, everything will be okay. Well, I think that comes after mindset and skill set, but it's still critical. We still need GPSs to help us through our work. So I break these down into 2 categories. I call them techniques and technologies. Techniques, you can think of the processes we go through to collaborate together to solve really, really challenging problems. And that can be as basic as design thinking, a tool set to help you and others to be able to empathize. Remember the word empathize, and then define problems that a customer or a stakeholder has, ideate new solutions, prototype those solutions, and then test them with real customers or real stakeholders. But then you put that on steroids and you do what I call rapid prototyping from the work of a man by the name of Tom Chi, where you can do all of those things in real time and solve problems that could be extremely complicated. And then finally, what we call moonshot thinking. Don't just solve problems, but 10x the solution. How could it be 10 times better, 10 times faster, 10 times cheaper, 10 times more people could use it? These are all techniques that you can use to be able to apply them to those thorny problems in a world of exponential change. And then, of course, technologies, and I won't belabor the point, but obviously, when we talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, we talk about next generation communications technologies, next generation health technologies. That exponential curve, all those technologies are changing so rapidly, we have to have a constantly changing tool set, a toolkit that allows us to be able to solve some of the greatest challenges, some of those exponential challenges that the world keeps bringing to us. All right, so I've talked about some of the different steps that we need to go through. Finally, how do we decide, now that we are emerging in that third phase of the Great Reset, how do we choose? Like, how do we make decisions about what we should focus on? Well, I'm going to show you a model that I think really speaks to what's unique about us as humans. And you can see if this resonates with you. So I talked about there being these sort of 3 phases, and that here we are in that third phase. We sort of have 2 choices. We can either bungee cord back to the way we worked before. We could go back to the office. We could go back to our cubicles. We could go back to our commutes. And within a few months, we can forget that this pandemic era ever happened. Or we can focus on those superpowers that I just talked about, the mindset and the skill set, and using the tool set that could enable us to build much more human-centric work and to do it with each other. How are we going to do that? Well, let me go back to talking about those rules of work, and then I'm looking forward to a great discussion with Arnobio. So I'm going to focus specifically on the meaning of work. Now, think of the old rules of work, your parents or your grandparents. what did they do first? They needed to just get paid for their work. Your first horrible job that you had, you just needed to get paid for it, right? And then after a while, you realize, oh, if I'm good at it, I could get paid better. Okay, so this is the old rules of work. Just do what you're good at, get paid well, put a roof over your family's head, and everybody's happy, right? Well, maybe not everybody is happy. My father found in this book, What Color is Your Parachute, 50 years ago when he first wrote it, that if you also give people the choice, the permission to do work that they love, to focus on problems they love to solve, to use skills they love to use, to work with people who help them do their best work, you didn't necessarily have to give up being good at it or getting paid well for it. You could have all three of these. Now, maybe when you change fields or change careers, you might have to take a pay cut for a little while. But if you're doing what you love, that intersection of what you're good at and what you love, what I call superpowers, that gives you a tremendous opportunity to be able to solve unique problems. Remember that creative problem solving I was talking about. And then finally, again, that might have been enough for many people, but young people, especially nowadays, are also asking, what does the world need? Now, it just so happens that this is called ikigai. It's practiced in Japan, especially in Okinawa, where there's some of the longest lived people in the world. And they believe that a life is not well lived unless your work includes all four of these: what you can get paid for, what you're good at, what you love, and what the world needs. Now, in the old rules of work, what did our parents and our grandparents do? This was a stack or a ladder. Maybe they got to what the world needs when they volunteered in retirement at the local food bank, but maybe they didn't. So if they just focused on what they could get paid for, what they're good at, that was probably enough. But as we're emerging into the third phase of the Great Reset, as we are rewriting the rules of work together, I want to encourage you to see it the way many young people see it nowadays, which is that they are flipping this stack. They first are asking, what does the world need? If I can do that, that will be what I love. And then if I do what I love, I'll get good at it. And if I get good at it, I'll get paid for it. Not just feeling that there's meaning, but having what in Singularity we call massive transformative purpose. What is it that drives you? What makes you feel like you're here on the planet? Now, not everybody has to have that. As a matter of fact, many people aren't looking that much for meaning. Think of it as a spectrum. Think of it as something from, you're not interested in that topic at all, to, oh, maybe I'm somewhat interested, to, oh, no, that's a subject I love. Then it becomes a hobby. Then it becomes your work. Again, you might stop somewhere along this path, but we each have the permission now, especially in the era of the Great Resignation, to be pursuing passions and then ultimately to determining what the purpose of our work might be. That is a North Star or a Southern Cross in Brazil. That is a direction that might guide us in our work so that we are having all four of those elements in our work. All right, so I'm going to wrap up here. So yes, we're emerging from a Great Reset. Exponential change. Today it's a virus. Tomorrow it's artificial generalized intelligence or unlimited fusion power that's going to change our world. That's why we need to co-create on building these next rules together. That's why we need that next mindset, skill set, and tool set. And that's why we each can be empowered and have the permission to determine how we're going to change. And of course, if any of these ideas were interesting to you, please, you can always find links to all these things on my website on gbolles.com. So I'm going to stop presenting there. I know we were sort of sipping from the fire hose there, Arnobio. You can help us to sort of sift through this and find the points that you think are most relevant.
Fantastic, Gary. Thank you so much for this wonderful insights. Always a joy to learn from you. Now what I want to do, and I'll say this in Portuguese too, nós vamos abrir agora para perguntas, mais ou menos 10 minutos de perguntas e bate-papo. Quem está assistindo a gente pelo YouTube, pode colocar aí nos comentários, e aí a produção vai nos ajudar a trazer aqui para a conversa com o Gary. E aqui, né, todo mundo que está no fórum executivo também fica à vontade para colocar as perguntas no chat. E e em instantes vão ter um momento de ainda mais interação com ele. Gary, I see, for example, that we're joined here today by Daniel Machado, and Daniel is the CEO of an organization called Rebels Education, and he works with, he has a company that helps students, especially high school students, prepare for the college admissions exams. You know, it's he's over 10 million learners, and we work closely with him on some of our work with Sirius too. And when I think about the folks he works with, you know, high school students getting ready, they haven't worked yet or not so much. What would you say to them? That because you know, right now they're getting advice from their parents, and their parents came from a whole different world. What would you tell them about how to prepare for this future of work?
It's speaking of youth, Marina has a couple of youth in the session here, so we'll speak to them in their future, right? So the answer is, first off, we all, hopefully many of us know what it was like to be a teenager and how challenging that is, and it's a very challenging time to be a teenager. I mean, even if you were a teenager not too long ago, you know, I didn't grow up in a world that had these digital distraction machines and my friends all collaborating on social media. So I think we all first off have to understand that it is a very, very different time. We have to give them the credit to know that they're growing up in a very, very different time. But if there's only a couple things, a couple superpowers that I would want to help young people to be able to understand. First off, one of the things we need to understand is they don't know the rules, right? So they might be learning the rules of education, and then we're going to throw them into the box of work. Remember the 3 boxes? Without any preparation. We're not going to be helping them. And they probably don't even know the rules of college. So we're helping to prepare them for going into college and taking the exam tests. But do they really understand what they're getting themselves into? No. So we have to help them to prepare. So first off, I would say the reason I showed the PACE skills, problem solvers, adaptive, creative, with empathy. If every high schooler can learn those skills, they will be far more effective. They will be far more prepared for that world of exponential change. So I would say we want to help them with the mindset. They want to think like problem solvers. They want to feel that they can be adaptive. They want to develop their creative skills. They want to have empathy for those around them. But that would be helping them to develop those skills. And then the third thing I would want, again, waving my magic wand, if I can give them a tool set, it is the tools of knowing more about themselves, what I call self-inventory. If they can learn tools, techniques to go throughout their lives where they can always understand what their own skills are, they can always understand what their values are, what makes them tick, what drives them in the world. They can always understand the kinds of people they love to work around, the kinds of problems they love to solve. They will be able to use that tool set over and over and over again in their lives. We've taught people as young as 5th grade to learn those tools. But your parents didn't learn those tools. Your grandparents didn't learn those tools. They had to figure out some of that as they went along. We can power students. We can give them these superpowers for better understandings about themselves so that they can be more effective in their futures.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gary. We have a question here for Fernando, which is, what's your take on the scenario for future of work in Brazil specifically?
Yeah. So I'll give you a couple of aspects of it. So first off, the Brazilian people have some unique characteristics that to me are just wonderful and fascinating. First off, from a societal standpoint, you see, even though division and polarization is common in countries around the world, and we certainly have that here in the United States. You look at, for instance, when the virus hit, you look at how Brazil ended up, so basically all sort of rowing their oars in the same direction, and especially in Sao Paulo, how rapidly you still have you have a vaccination rate higher in Sao Paulo than we do in the United States, than we do in most cities in the United States. And so there is a marvelous set, and you may disagree with me, but what I've seen is a marvelous aspect of this Brazilian society is that people can pull together very, very rapidly to focus on key challenges. You have challenges from an economic standpoint. I won't show you the slide, but basically you could think of. I'm sure you could picture this in your mind. But the economic opportunity, economic value in Brazil sort of goes from top to bottom. You've got 50% of the Brazilian population is in the coasts and 50% interior. And then you've got sort of these waves of the poorest people are in the north, and then it gets more affluent. And then finally, you've got this bubble of Sao Paulo, right? And so the challenge with that dynamic is that it can make it very difficult from an economic standpoint to give people a lot of access to be able to lift all boats. And so I would say focus on a number of things. Try to leapfrog what other countries have done from an education standpoint. And Sirius is a great example. You want to first try to become as flexible in the way you provide high quality learning from birth all the way through till the end of careers, and every step in between, so that everybody has access to high quality learning opportunities. But you're going to have to do that without being anchored in the traditional ways of doing it. You need to focus on the next rules of learning and how you will make that much more flexible and available to people. The second is, within organizations, it's really, really important to redefine what work is, and especially the relationship between the manager and the worker. I went through that very quickly when I talked about the old rules and the next rules, but it's very, very important to have people trained in being much more of what I call team guides, because if you have the traditional mindset, what you end up doing is you don't end up hiring people with unusual skill sets. There's a marvelous label here that's used by a group called Opportunity at Work in the United States. It's called STARS, Skilled Through Alternative Routes. And what that means is you don't have a classic degree. You didn't follow the classic career path. And so I think that's another opportunity for Brazil, is to open up the aperture for the kinds of people that you can hire and the kinds of ways that managers work with teams. And I think you have all the potential for doing that. You just needs to be very widely distributed.
Excellent. Thank you, Gary. We have a question from Paulo, who is following us on YouTube. So what would you recommend someone that gets the next rules of work, but they're still inserted in the old model, and they want to change careers, but they still feel stuck in the old model, perhaps in their current job?
All right, so let me give you, we found through 50 years of my father's work, we found 3 steps when you go through the process of thinking about your career. And the old rules, you only did the final one. But the 3 steps are what my father called what, where, and how. The what is what is unique about you. So that's self-inventory. Whatever you can do to learn about your own skills, to learn about what drives you, to learn about what you love, go through that process. My father's book, I know, was translated into Portuguese, but I'm not trying to sell him his books. We've got courses on eparachute.com. I'm not trying to sell our courses. Use strengths finders. Use anything that helps you to get better insights about you. That's the what. The second step is the where. Use research. We have this thing called the internet. You can do informational interviewing. You can talk to people in different fields. Learn what it's like to do work in other arenas that you might not be familiar to you. Look at yourself as a researcher or as a detective, going about finding out more about the where, what scenarios you could use your unique skills in different kinds of work. You would be amazed how many different kinds of jobs there are that you couldn't even conceive of. And then finally, it's the how, the mechanics, the job hunting process. Sure, you need a resume in many cases. Sure, you need to learn to do interviewing, but informational interviewing, talking to people about their work, researching specific organizations to get into, presenting yourself as a problem solver to those organizations. That is the way to be able to go through a career shift that gives you confidence in yourself and others confidence in you.
Fantastic. Hey, Gary, a question from Camille on YouTube also. What's the role you see for example, freelance work and independent work in the future of work?
So Camila, great question. So I showed the portfolio of work because this is something that especially many young people do without even thinking. You know, they download an app. Now they're picking up people's food and delivering it. Now they're driving their car and delivering people. Now they're working a gig in a warehouse. It's perfectly natural to be able to use an app to find access to work. The challenge is that it doesn't bring stability. It doesn't bring certainty. It doesn't necessarily help you develop skills. If you become the best Uber driver on the planet, you're probably not going to become an executive at Uber. So the good news is, I always say the friction to access is reduced. That is, you can do it tomorrow. The bad news is that it doesn't normally have a career path associated with it. So what are the circumstances under which it makes sense to do freelancing and that portfolio of work? When you're transitioning from one kind of work to another, because it's easy to find usually. When you need extra money, when you want to learn some new arena, but you don't know anything about it. I've never driven a car before, so now I'm going to learn how to drive a car. But they don't necessarily lead to mastery. And so that's why I showed the portfolio of learning. If there's anything I could say is if you freelance a lot, it's still important to make sure you have things that fascinate you. That's why I showed the spectrum of meaning. Find the topics you can't live without. Find the things that fascinate you so much you need to go learn more about those. And then maybe that can become the kind of work that ultimately you'll want to do more and more in. Now, if you're a programmer, you probably can make really good money doing freelance projects for quite some time and continually having new projects. And that might be a great lifestyle. Awesome. If you're driving for Uber, many Uber drivers I talk to don't even know if they're making money at it. So it's really, really important to be intentional about this. You're switching between jobs or careers, awesome, fine. You do freelancing, but it's always helpful to make sure you're driving towards something, that North Star or Southern Cross I showed, where you have passions that are driving you towards the kind of work you want to get deeper and deeper into.
Excellent, thank you. Gary, this has been a wonderful chat. What we're going to do now is thank everyone for your presence today, for accompanying us on the YouTube live stream. It's been wonderful to have you. And now we're going to conclude the stream on YouTube, conclude the recording, and then we're going to move to the second part of the chat, which is the unrecorded. You can share your secrets, the failures, what's going well in your company, and we're going to continue this here with Gary. Thank you, everyone. E agora eu vou esperar o sinal da produção também de que a gente concluiu o stream. Muito obrigado, grande abraço.